Hi guys! So recently we've suffered a huge loss in the gaming community. The YouTuber slash streamer Etika, Desmond, he passed away. He took his own life. I don't really think that any of us really knew how little time that he had left. I'm not gonna lie, it has been really hard to cope with. Desmond was like a really good guy. He was trustworthy, loyal, entertaining as all hell. He always knew how to make everyone else feel better, even though he was going through his own struggles. I can't thank him enough for all of the kindness that he's shown me in the past couple of months that I've known him. He's always been really supportive. I regret not having more time to spend actually, I don't know, what am I trying to say? He really helped me out through some really bad times. My regret is not making more time to be with him. It's really important to cherish the bonds that you have with loved ones. Like, that is the overall take-home message. If you or someone that you know is struggling with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts, or anything of that nature, please know that you're not alone in that fight and that there's people who love you and want you to succeed, okay? There are people who want to help you, and there are hotlines and support groups and other types of resources that will try to get you the help that you need before you sink deeper into that rabbit hole. So this next episode is dedicated to Desmond. Thank you for helping me along the way. Any amount of money made from this video will be donated to the Canadian Mental Health Association. For a couple of years before I got my hands on a PlayStation, all we had in our household were Nintendo consoles. And my favorite game to play was Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo. I would play this game with my older sister all the time. See, that's me, Bob. This was the couch multiplayer game that I desperately needed in my life. When my sister was at school, I'd be at home crying, waiting for her to come back in the evening so she could finish the water levels for me. Cause there's no way you can tell me you didn't get lost trying to navigate through this thing. Not only that, the game just felt a lot more fun being able to play it with another person. Donkey and Diddy have their own unique abilities, so it really felt like a tag team adventure, being able to divide those character strengths between two people. And also it gave me a really good excuse to do that hand slapping thing, because there's no greater way to prove a friendship than having your own unique handshake. Now give it back, it's my turn. Mix together the fun co-op elements, the atmospheric music, and the brilliant level design, and you've got yourself the recipe for a truly immersive game. I really felt like I was diving into a whole new experience and I didn't even need VR goggles. David Wise did such a great job evoking emotion and feeling through an arrangement of sounds. The instruments used for certain levels match the setting of each stage perfectly. They all play really well off of each other. It's like a work of art. For example, the jungle was filled with upbeat, mischievous arrangements, and then we make our way through places like Gorilla Glacier and Kremrock Industries, and the music and environment leaves things feeling more desolate, dire, and sinister. What's with this music? What's happening? I found myself feeling a range of emotions: euphoria, hopelessness, sadness, and motivation as I climbed my way out of the forest into the dingy industrialized part of the island, all the way to King K. Rool's ship known as Gangplank Galleon. Without the use of any dialogue, how was I able to feel so much dread for these two little monkeys? Is there a hidden meaning behind why all of this was set up to make me feel this way? I mean, I can't be the only one that was left with these feelings. And thinking back to my early experience playing Donkey Kong Country is what really sparked what I'm about to speculate. So let's just pull back for a second, really shift gears. I want us to look at what was really going on in the real world around the time of Donkey Kong's inception. Donkey Kong Country was released November 21st, 1994. Around that same time, spawning from roughly the mid-80s to late 90s, we had an abundance of ads running that promoted messages for healthy living, like Body Break, Pee Wee Herman telling us to say no to drugs, and the 3 R's being reusing, reducing, and recycling. Yeah, do you remember those ads? Recycle, reduce, reuse, and close the loop. we're not gonna talk about those ads. There were so many activist groups back then campaigning for people to save the rainforest, which is something that isn't as heavily advertised today as it was back then. I mean, speaking of which, how's the rainforest doing right now? Did we save it? On top of all this, the 90s was ripe with so many kids shows teaching us about animals and wildlife preservation, like Discovery Kids with shows like Henry's Amazing Animals and, you guessed it, Zaboomafoo. And you and Zaboomafoo. The networks thought that children were the future, and if you can get them to better appreciate wildlife at a young age, you'll have a greater chance at teaching them to preserve and protect nature once they become responsible adults. I was really young at the time, and I saw these messages so frequently, and all I really knew was that we had a moral responsibility to recycle, damn it, or else the hole in the ozone layer would blow up and we'd all die a painfully fiery death, and global warming and so forth. There was not only an abundance of these messages in wildlife television shows and advertisements, but companies stuck subtle to not so subtle environmental messages into our cartoons. Man, even our cereal. We've just gotta save that rainforest. Clearly, environmental preservation was a hot topic in the 90s. Now take that real-world phenomenon that was so hot in the 90s and think back to the main premise of Donkey Kong Country. It's a game about a couple of monkeys who had their island invaded and their banana horde stolen, and it's up to them to rescue their friends, bring back all the bananas, and defeat the evil Kremling settlers, restoring peace to their land. But something feels deeper. Could it be that there lies a secret environmental message behind the premise of the first Donkey Kong Country? Because it kind of feels like it. With what was going on around that time, it wouldn't be outside the realms of possibility. So in today's video, I'm going to explain the reasons why I believe there's a hidden social commentary within Donkey Kong Country that alludes to many of the environmental issues of the 90s, such as the Amazon deforestation crisis, pollution and conservation efforts, and anti-poaching initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest marketing campaigns that was growing around the time of the game's release was the deforestation crisis of the Amazon rainforest. Now, if you didn't know, the Amazon rainforest is the largest rainforest in the world. Rainforests are important because they absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen, which I'm pretty sure we need to be alive. They're responsible for climate stabilization and are home to a biodiversity of plants and animals. And if we didn't have rainforests, then we probably wouldn't have rain either. So that's why it's important that if we're going to cultivate resources, then we have to do it in a way that won't cause irreparable damage to the overall landscape. So if I pick a flower, for example, I need to make sure that another flower grows in its place, kind of deal. During the 1960s, colonists were cutting down trees and disrupting the overall agriculture of the rainforest through their methods of crop cultivation and mining, leading to the pollution and deforestation of the rainforest. Deforestation is essentially the process of clearing out a mass amount of trees or an entire forest for the purpose of building factories, farms, and industrial or urbanized areas. And when this happens in rainforests, it can, in turn, leave wildlife without homes and disrupt the ecosystem. With the case of the Brazilian Amazon rainforest, the farming system was based on crop cultivation, and this method resulted in the destruction of the landscape's overall soil fertility, making the land impossible to manage crops. So they messed up the flora and the fauna. To combat this problem, the Save the Amazon Rainforest organization, known as STARO, was created in an effort to preserve and conserve the rainforest from further destruction by educating the general public through PSAs and fundraisers. The practices that lead to deforestation, such as mining and urbanization, and the damage that it leaves behind, like climate change and pollution, we can oddly enough see echoed through Donkey Kong Country. Poaching, urbanization, and industrialization are all deforestation processes that lead to biodiversity loss. Under this theory, we can only assume that all of your animal buddies on Kong Island, such as Rambi the rhinoceros and Onguard the swordfish, are trapped in crates because they've essentially been hunted and poached by the evil Kremlings. Under this theory, I want you to imagine that the Kremlings are a representation of human colonists. Notice the lack of wildlife as you make your way throughout the island. Industrialization, the building of factories and mines, often clears out all other wildlife from the area. Approximately 80% 90% of the world's land-based species can be found in forests. Yet in the game, aside from the few Kongs that live on the island and are Kremling settlers, the only other land animals seen on the island are Naughties, Neckies, Zingers, and Slippas. Who knows how many other creatures could have existed if not for the deforestation that cleared out most of the island. On top of a lack of biodiversity, we can also observe that a lot of mines have been created on the island, especially in the levels seen in monkey mines. Mining is one of the most detrimental practices associated with deforestation. When we look at the map in monkey mines, we can see the entire patch of land has had its resources expunged from the island from the Kremlings. The practice of mining results in a plummeting of resources, and in this case, it's the hoard of bananas hidden within the caves. So the Kremlings are not only digging mines, but are also building factories on Kong Island. We can see this best represented in the 5th stage, known as Kremkrok Industries. Out of all the other 5 stages present within the game, Kremkrok Industries is by far the most contaminated of areas, which we can clearly see illustrated in the pre-rendered backdrop. According to the game's manual, these factories don't adhere to the strict safety codes and are full of burning oil drums, faulty lighting, and perilous platforms. The majority of these levels contain mines, factories, and dangerous explosives, further polluting the air. All of this pollution would inevitably result in mutations on the island, which could be a possible explanation as to why the final bosses of each stage appear to be oversized and mutated. And speaking of mutations, Congo Jungle appears to be the most well-preserved spot on the island, probably because it's the area furthest away from Gangplank Galleon, further from the invasion and all the other madness. Vine Valley comes in a close second. It appears that a vast amount of trees in these levels have been cleared and burned down, trees which were essential to getting to and from other platforms in the previous area, Congo Jungle. These tall trees have instead been replaced with man-made tree houses and ropes, strongly suggesting that this may have been set up by the Kremlings to urbanize the area. It's also important to note the severe weather changes we see on such a small island. Deforestation is actually a main contributor to severe climate change due to the decreasing number of trees available to capture the rising carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. So the more trees that disappear through this malpractice can result in major droughts, which would likely explain the barren temple landscape in the area monkey mines. Deforestation in snowy regions can also result in an increase of floods and melting snow, which would explain why many of the levels in Gorilla Glacier, well, take place inside of a dripping, icy glacier. Man, this is like a lot deeper than I initially thought. This ain't just some kids game about a couple of stolen bananas. Look around you, DK. Your island is in peril. The climate is out of whack. I mean, so what if you got your hoard back? What are you gonna do about all the cut down trees, all of the polluted ponds, and the empty, toxic mines? You're supposed to be a leader, man. What are you gonna do about this? Stop. Please don't sing. Please stop.
There will be no Congo bongo and no bananas too.
Hey yo, look out down below.